Okay, well, thank you for joining us today for the Responsible Pest Management, a Guide for Home and Business Owners webinar. My name is Alex Robinson, and I'm the Sustainable Solutions Coordinator with Green Economy London. And we are joined today with representatives from Bird Friendly London, Salthaven Wildlife Rehabilitation and Education Centre, and Ontario Wildlife Removal to help us explore the benefits of phasing out rodenticides and practical methods to exclude rodent pests from your buildings. For a few quick housekeeping items, this webinar is being recorded, so it can be posted to YouTube afterwards for those who couldn't make the session. And we will also have a question and answer period at the end. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please pose your questions in the chat box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. So the session will begin with a quick introduction to the London Environmental Network and Green Economy London and how we support home and business owners to improve their sustainability. Following this, Brendan Samuels from Bird Friendly London will talk about the Responsible Pest Management program we are currently running. And our guest speaker Brian Salt from Salthaven will then discuss the impacts of rodenticides on wildlife and why it's important to consider alternative strategies. Lastly, Jared from Ontario Wildlife Removal will share strategies that you can implement to prevent rodent pests from entering your building. And lastly, we will finish off today's session with a question and answer period. The London Environmental Network is an environmental charitable organization based in London, Ontario. The London Environmental Network launched in 2015 and became a registered charity in 2021. Our vision is for London to be known as one of the greenest and most resilient cities in Canada by building participation, collaboration, and capacity in our community to co-create positive environmental change. Here's a look at our programs that work to achieve collective community climate goals. Green Economy London is the business sustainability program hosted by the London Environmental Network. Green Economy London offers a practical, cost-effective, collaborative, and community-based approach for businesses to set and achieve sustainability targets. The target areas we focus on are greenhouse gas emissions, waste reduction and diversion, water conservation, and environmental stewardship. We also support businesses through technical workshops, providing resources, funding opportunities, and celebrating achievements to showcase their commitment to sustainability. We currently have over 60 green economy leaders and are continuously growing. And I wanted to take a moment to thank all of our supporters and sponsors who help make our programming possible. To connect with us and get involved with our programs, please visit our social media pages or sign up for our newsletters through our website. And with that, I will pass it over to Brendan Samuels from Bird Friendly London. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everybody. Thank you for making time to be here this evening. Really excited to chat about a subject that I'm quite passionate about. And we're really fortunate to also have some subject experts with us today to translate knowledge and help you guys address rodenticide use in our city, and ideally to also pest-proof your buildings. So I'm just going to share my screen. I prepared a few slides. You've already been welcomed to the program, but I just want to acknowledge that this is made possible by a collaboration of many people coming together in the environmental sector. We're grateful for support from the London Environmental Network, from the City of London, and from Nature Canada. So just briefly, I'm the coordinator for a grassroots group called Bird Friendly London. We are kind of the London-based chapter of a national program called Bird Friendly Cities that is being offered by Nature Canada now in its third year. This is a picture of our official city bird that was selected by people in London. It's the big red one. Our bird team is made up of representatives from different community organizations, such as the London Environmental Network and Salthaven, who are here today, Nature London. I represent the Advanced Facility for Avian Research at Western University, the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and Friends of Stony Creek. And we carry out a number of activities in the city, focusing on birds and connections with people. There are now quite a few bird-friendly cities across the country. There's also a similar program for bird-friendly cities in the United States and in South America. And what's exciting about this program is we're sharing knowledge across these jurisdictions. So when a municipality like London develops something that works, we can share it with other communities that are trying to protect birds where they live. And I'm really pleased to report that I've heard that London has just been recertified as a bird-friendly city by Nature Canada. We have the highest possible score for bird friendliness in the country. What I mean by that is the program involves participating municipalities achieving certain criteria. And these criteria are meant to reduce impacts on wild bird populations, promote bird habitat, and get people in the community excited about and knowledgeable about sharing space with birds. This principle that I've got on the screen now is one that really guides a lot of the work we do, which is to inspire individual change at home and at work. Individually, if we do something small each day, that only makes a little difference. But if we share that knowledge and we help others to do the same, we can have this ripple effect through the community and really drive change. This is a sign I've got on my front lawn, actually, with information for my neighbors. I want to encourage anyone who's interested in this subject to check out our website, birdfriendlylondon.ca/education. A lot of the resources that we've produced for education are available here. The video from today's webinar will also be shared online, so please do take advantage of those resources. So Bird Friendly Cities is a program that's received quite a bit of support from the federal government. I've just listed some of the criteria here for the program, but one of the action items for us as a community that's participating is to address pesticide use and the impacts that pesticides have on wild bird populations. We've heard in the news quite a bit about pesticides used in agriculture and garden settings, neonicotinoids that are reducing insect populations and causing secondary effects. But we also know that this applies to pesticides known as rodenticides. These are pest solutions that affect rodents as well as animals that consume those rodents, which is something we'll be talking about today. And so this program that we're offering and speaking to you about is really aimed at addressing pesticide use in our city. If you're not familiar with it, we commissioned Rosemary Moscow of Bird and Moon Comics to give a really nice explanation visually of what this is all about. You probably have seen bait boxes like the one shown in the middle, scattered around the city, especially outside buildings. Those have poisoned bait in them, and they're quite attractive to rodents. When those rodents consume the bait, it's usually not inside the box. They'll take it away with them somewhere, or maybe they eat it on the spot and it takes a while to set in. The poisons that they've ingested remain in their tissues. And if they get eaten by something like a bird of prey, such as a bald eagle, that can bioaccumulate when you think about how many of those rodents a bald eagle would eat in a typical year. And we've seen the local impacts of this. You'll hear a little bit from Brian Salt from Salthaven about what that looks like. We're here to talk about some of the solutions today with a pest control service provider, really aimed at trying to phase out the use of rodenticides as much as possible and shifting people to lower impact alternatives, which are usually more effective. So I won't get too far ahead of myself, but I also just want to point out that apart from individual action, it's really important that we also advocate for policy action so that we're addressing this at the scale that's required to protect bird populations. Here's just a sign for our program that we're offering. In Canada, we've got shared jurisdictional responsibility for pesticides. The federal government registers pest control products. Provinces and territories regulate the sale, use, transportation, storage, and disposal of pesticides. And at the municipal level, there are opportunities for introducing bylaws that can restrict the sale and application of pesticides. For example, earlier this year, the city of Pickering became the first city in Ontario to enact a policy basically banning rodenticides. And I believe Clarington is going to be soon following up with something similar. We need to drive this kind of change by having conversations with our representatives in government. The province of British Columbia became the first province to phase out rodenticides as of the beginning of this year, pointing to the concerns about impacts on wildlife. And I'm showing you this because their website has really comprehensive information about how to pest-proof your building without relying on rodenticides. Basically, they have restricted the use of the application of rodenticides only to essential services like the ones that are listed here. If you're not on this list, then you're not supposed to be using rodenticides. These are some of the examples of resources that are available on their website, and I'll paste the link in the chat a little bit later. Yeah, really encourage you to check out this guide. It's quite comprehensive and offers a lot of solutions that you'll be hearing about today. Okay, so I'm going to pause there, actually, and I would love to call upon Brian Salt, who's been kind enough to be here today, representing Salthaven. Salthaven is a wildlife rehabilitation and education center that's based just outside of London, Ontario. They provide services for Londoners, often responding to emergencies involving critters, and they have direct experience interacting with the use of rodenticides in our city and what that means for local raptors in particular. So welcome, Brian. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Brandon.
I guess we can begin by asking you, what would you say stands out as something you want the public to understand about how rodenticides are affecting wildlife in our city?
Yeah, rodenticide is something that we don't think about too much in the city. It's a different problem in the city than it is in the rural areas, for sure. But you know, it's from our perspective, we see these animals that come in that have been incapacitated because of secondary rodenticide. It's a very easy diagnosis. You look in a bald eagle's mouth and it's white because they're bleeding internally. And it's a very painful, slow death that oftentimes there's nothing we can do to help them because they're too far gone. Bald eagles, for instance, are so strong. I mean, unless they're falling out of a tree, you'd never know anything was wrong with them. But by that point, they're in really deep, and we saved maybe 1 out of 4 at that point. We use vitamin K, which is a coagulant, to offset the effects of the internal bleeding. But as I say, unless we can get them early enough, they don't make it. And sometimes when we realize intuitively that they're not going to make it, we choose a humaner way for them to go, and that's humane euthanasia. They obviously in pain. They have convulsions, and ultimately one of those convulsions ends. They end up dying as a result. But many of Ontario's native and at-risk species face high risks of rodenticide. In fact, in the United States, back a few years ago, I think this was back in 2019, there was a study that was done that saw 70% of all wild birds of prey had traces of secondary rodenticide on board. And that's an astounding number when you stop to think of it. But it's not only raptors; it affects others, family pets. You know, cats catch mice. Some cats that are given too much freedom by their owners, perhaps, and or dogs. The poison can exist in the environment for an incredible long period of time. So it's there on a constant basis. In the United States, that in I think it was 2020 or 2019, poison control in the United States documented over 10,000 cases of secondary rodenticide poisoning in children. So this goes well beyond our friendly birds of prey. And the birds of prey are, we're poisoning the very allies that are helping us in this rodenticide or in this rodent population control. An owl, for instance, a barn owl, will eat over 1,000 mice in a year, and a bald eagle will do the same in number of rats. The thing with rodenticide, especially with rats, is that when they feel threatened, they go motionless in an attempt to thwart their predators. But what the rat doesn't realize is that birds of prey can see things that we can't. And for instance, they can see into the ultraviolet range. And strangely enough, rodent fur shows up in the ultraviolet. And so, the eagle swoops down and grabs this rat that is now motionless, maybe incapacitated because of rodenticide, and that eagle stands a good chance of dying as well. So it's a real problem. And for every one we see, there's probably 10 more out there that we don't see. So, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty devastating. You had mentioned bald eagles as an example. Can you recall any other species that have been affected by rodenticides that you're aware of in the London area?
Sure. Great horned owls. They seem to be, especially in the springtime when they have young, and the young are in the nest and they need feeding, and so the adults are very active in bringing these mice back to them. So it's an ongoing problem with great horned owls for sure. We've seen it only in a couple cases for saw-whet owls, or not saw-whets, screech owls. But even in that case, they have a tendency to die very quickly. So I suspect that there's a lot more than what we see that are actually succumbing to secondary rodenticide poisoning. But it's not only birds of prey. I mean, lynx, bobcats, foxes. They depend heavily on rodent populations for food, and they get hit pretty hard too.
Yeah. Like you said, we're only really ever documenting a small fraction of what's going on. And birds are really good at masking illness. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
probably only once they're really, really sick, having consumed quite a few rodents, that you would start to notice those symptoms.
Yeah.
Do you think there could be raptors that have like a small amount of poison, like a below a lethal amount, but in a way that's causing other secondary effects? For example, I do research on bird window collisions, and something I wondered about is whether animals that suffer, collision with a vehicle or something else might have something else happening in the background if they're suffering from internal poisoning.
I'm sure. And a lot of these animals that um, were autopsied were because of collisions with vehicles and whatnot. And they were the ones that had found on board secondary rodenticide. And there's little doubt in my mind that it incapacitates them to a degree, at least, so that they're not as agile, they're not as alert, they're easily distracted. And they're not very good as far as catching prey is concerned. Some of the hawks and owls that we have brought in are extremely low. In other words, they haven't eaten for a while, and so it incapacitates their ability to be predators to these rodents.
Yeah, and really unfortunate. Um, I imagine some people might be wondering what they're supposed to do if they ever find a bird of prey like an owl or an eagle that's in distress. That's not quite as simple as scooping up a little songbird and putting it in a box. Do you have any advice for what the public can do in that situation?
Yeah, their guns are their feet, really. As awesome as those beaks look, their feet are really their guns. With the exception of bald eagles. Bald eagles will go at you with everything: wings, feet, beak, anything they have at their disposal. But most raptors, like a red-tailed hawk, rarely will bite or go at you with their beak. So it's their feet you have to watch for. And so we don't recommend people trying to catch them, because a red-tailed hawk, for instance, can exercise about 400 pounds per square inch gripping strength, which is incredible. Bald eagle, almost 700 pounds per square inch. So that is like somebody who weighs 700 pounds with 1 inch heels standing on your hand with all the weight on one foot. That's going to leave a mark. So you don't want to go at these animals in an unpredictable way. What we recommend is that you take a box or a tote and you place it over them, and then slide something underneath the tote, tip them up, and you got a hawk in a box type of thing. And you secure that lid, and then give Salthaven, or if you have another wildlife rehabilitator in your area, give them a call and they'll make arrangements to bring them in. But no food, no water, just quiet, dark, and warm is usually the magic there.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. One final question for you. In all your years of handling raptors and birds of prey, I mean, you've got a real breadth of experience. What's something that you learned about kind of their nature and spending so much time interacting with them in captivity? Is there something about them that really inspires you or stands out?
Their intelligence.
Hmm.
They are absolutely intelligent. You know, we have a tendency to regard things and give them credibility according to how smart we think they are. Well, we do the same thing with people, don't we? I mean, if you had a problem, you'd talk to a friend they thought was a little smarter than maybe one that wasn't so smart. So, and that regard allows us to approach them differently, and sometimes without the respect that they deserve. I know that you know, we communicate verbally, and animals communicate very subtly with body language, and that subtleness of that body language is such that it's barely perceptible to people that aren't used to communicating that way. So yeah, they once you learn their language, when we're training our wildlife ambassadors, we've come to realize that just the way they look at you, or the way they hold their feet or turn their body slightly, those are all indications that of what's going on up here. We don't know what they're thinking, but it gives us an idea of what they're feeling, at least. And so it allows us to be more effective trainers. But they are intelligent, and I don't believe, in fact, at Salthaven, to be called a bird brain is actually a compliment. So it gives you some idea as to what they're all about.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight. I've lived with parrots over the years, and
Mm,
you're absolutely right about the body language thing.
yeah,
Like, there's a lot of nuance and subtlety, but once you've spent time around an animal and have it be a bit comfortable with you, they show you who they really are.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Brian, for those insights.
You're welcome.
It's important, I think, to contextualize the work that we're doing in recognizing the local impact that it has for wildlife. After all, we are a bird-friendly city.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. The next guest we have to talk to today is Jared Huliston, who's here from Ontario Wildlife Removal. Hello, Jared. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Jared is one of the most knowledgeable people about this issue who I've met. He will speak for himself, but we've had a number of conversations about the work he does with people like participants in our pilot program, aiming to rely on more humane alternatives to rodenticide for pest-proofing buildings. And so Jared has been generous enough to share some of what he's learned and lessons for people who might be watching from home, wondering, strategies that they can take on. I guess I'd start, Jared. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so it started really early as a kid, always fascinated with animals, and well, fast forward, many years later, and got into wildlife work. And I'd like to explain: there's pest control companies and there's wildlife professionals, and we are wildlife professionals. We're the guys that wear tool belts, ladders, construction. We like to say we're general contractors that specialize in the wildlife trade. And what's that mean? It means for the last 20 years, and ever since I've been in this business, I've never once used poison for my job. Okay, so everything we do is exclusion, which means seal down the house, and we use one-way doors to get the animals to vacate the building. And we use these one-way doors from raccoons and squirrels and birds, and all the way down to mice. We have little mice one-way doors. So to be doing it for 20 years without poison, we know it can be done, and we know it's successful. And I'm happy to be a part of this and to educate and tell people, even people at home can start the process themselves to help rodent proof their house.
That's inspiring. Thank you. So, if you're listening in, you're probably wondering about maybe a particular building or in general best practices. Jared, what would you say are some of the common issues you see with buildings that have pest rodent problems?
Okay, so I think the biggest one to talk about that affects probably a lot of the homes right now is mice and rats. Okay. And everyone thinks that mice only enter through ground level, which they do, and they're opportunists. Okay, so I don't know if you have that slide ready. We'll call them weeping bricks. They're tiny little holes that are in the brick. Most people at home can go around with and get a little piece of what's called 1/4-inch hardware screen. And basically you cut them in, you shape them in a V, and you force fit them inside. I have to explain why we use these wire screens. And I go to houses and I see people just take caulking and seal these holes up. These holes are specifically made by builders to vent air through the brick to avoid to actually evaporate moisture in the brick. So you don't want to seal them up. What this does is it stops mice, snakes, even wasps and stuff like that going into these weeping bricks and invading your home. That's a very simple trick that you can do for, it's probably less than $15 to go around and shove them in there and to stop that critter flow. Now, moving up into a home, if you want to go to the next slide, it kind of shows some caulking up there. What you see there is this is the most common entry point for mice. Okay, mice will climb the brick wall from the outside and tuck under the soffit line. So, you go and get a good silicone. Sorry, excuse me. You have to make sure it's a 100% pure silicone. Don't use acrylic in this case. And what you want to do is where the brick meets the soffit, or in this case, a freeze board, you want to seal this all the way around your house. Okay. This will eliminate probably 99% of how mice, birds, wasps, even snakes climb walls to get into your home. This will substantially reduce the amount of entry points a mouse or other critters can get into. Now, there's lots of things that we get into when we're mouse proofing homes. If you have a siding home, what we call corner caps, hydro boxes, we're looking at wall vent lines and, electrical lines, service lines. A big one is a proper weather stripping on your garage door. As simple as going to Home Depot and getting a $60 new weather stripping to install on the bottom of the garage door will save you probably mass amount of times and of cleaning up mouse droppings and getting into your garbage inside your house. So there's lots of things you can do on your own. And we get people that do this on their own. And obviously some people can't do this and don't want to do it. And that's where we come into play. And there's companies like us throughout Ontario, there's companies like us across Canada, but we pride ourselves on being able to exclude animals and get them out humanely rather than using a pest control company that uses poisons. And let's be realistic. So you're using the poisons and sure, it solves the problem maybe for a month, but you're leaving all these holes open to allow more animals come back in. Then you call the pest control company and you're just consistently spending money. If we do our job correctly, we're going to fix your house and we warranty it. We warranty it for 5 years plus, but you spend the money once and you're done with that critter flow going into your house. And it's all been humane. We didn't have to use any poisons and it's a permanent fix to a problem. So as a homeowner, yes, you can do this. And we have people going, can you come out and do an inspection on my property and just tell me what I need to do? And we'll do that too as well. Okay, so what you're seeing now is basically what we had a wall vent. This would be a typical dryer vent. We removed the dryer vent because the actual entry point wasn't actually going into the dryer vent. It was actually beside the dryer vent. It wasn't sealed correctly. So in the first case here, what you're seeing is from a far away, is the wide angle, but close up, that's actually what's called a mouse one-way door. So when the mouse comes outside to get food and water, and believe it or not, right in the middle of winter when it's freezing cold, mice will come out as well. And the mice will come out that door, and once they're out that door, they can't get back in. So after a period of about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, we'll come back, remove that mouse door, and then install a new wall vent, and then put a screening over top, but caulk and seal around it. And above the other things of doing around the house and proofing the house, we now can consider that house mouse-free. And how do we know that they're mouse-free? Well, communication with our customer, but also what we can do is what we call a peanut butter test. And everyone can do this at home, okay? If you suspect mice or anything in your attic, take a little piece of cardboard with some peanut butter, put it in your attic for 24, 48 hours, and then come back. And if you use any activity that peanut butter is licked or gone, you have critter activity. Do the same thing in your basement, do the same thing in your garage. And once you've done all these pest proofing yourself and you keep doing this peanut butter test, you'll know if you've correctly solved the problem if your peanut butter is not licked after 24 or 48 hours. So there's tons of stuff you can do. And if you don't want it, there's professional companies out there like us that can help you do it.
That's great. Very succinct. Yeah, I was looking through some of these other examples you gave. I recently had an encounter with one of these on my own roof where the cover, like the one seen on the left, just disappeared. And we thought, oh, that was weird. A raccoon had made off with it and actually burrowed its way into the roof. There's a lot of different entry points that these animals can use. And so I found it really helpful to bring in a service provider who was trained to look for this stuff. But I think you've given a lot of really good examples where people could probably start to detect where rodents might be entering a property even on their own.
Yes, if I can interject, a lot.
Yeah.
What I didn't get into is also like up on roof stuff. When we get up on roof stuff, there's a lot of people that aren't comfortable up there. But what you're seeing on the left, or that roof vent, is chewed out by squirrels, and we get raccoons that rip them off. But yes, we make these custom screens that go around it that protect the roof vents from the animals. So you're never going to get rid of the animals in the area, but if you can proof these plastic roof vents and even some of the steel roof vents from animal activity, then you're drastically reducing the problem, or drastically reducing the risk of the problem being in your house. And as you know, once these animals in, water damage, annoying sounds at night, and also the cost of the damage. So we see a lot more people, once it's roof line stuff, to hire a professional that's trained in working at heights and stuff like that, that can get up there safely and effectively.
Yeah, makes sense. I was wondering, in the photo on the right here, you have that metal cage. What are the white things that are attaching it to the roof? What are they made of?
Okay, so those are actually steel washers and screws. And everybody asks me this, well, I don't want roof leaks in my house. So what we do is this is what adheres and secures that screen. So it's proof, so a raccoon can't pull it up. And what we do is we actually use it's a solvent that all roofers use that we put down before we screw it into the roof. And as the screw goes through the solvent, the washer in itself will watertight seal these areas. And therefore you're not going to get any water leaks, and the place is protected. So that's why what you see there is these screws and washers. Simply stapling, which we've seen companies do, or putting a screw in a couple spots without the washers, you're not really proofing that area, because a raccoon can typically rip that off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's those trade-offs, I guess. Anytime you're trying to attach something onto a roof, you need to be mindful of. Another piece of this that I've encountered is there are buildings where if you have a cafeteria, for example, or you've got garbage that's being stored in a communal area, the waste can really accumulate. Do you ever encounter situations where the risk of rodent infestations can be managed by containing those attractants, things that are bringing rodents into the building in the first place?
So you have to understand that rodents and all wild animals are opportunists. Okay, so if there's a void in a building that they could take advantage of, they will. Once they're in, if they smell food, they're going there. But of course, if there is an attractant such as food, and we see this a lot more in commercial environments, so factories, settings where doors can't really be closed, commercial establishments. And you're right, if you take away the food or properly contain or dispose of it, you're limiting the access or the temptation for these other rodents to come out and get into the living space of that building. And yes, if you can contain the garbage, and I'm actually going in my mind right now thinking of all these examples that we've dealt with, and I'll be honest, that's what we can tell everybody. But I see a lot of commercial applications give out notices and everything. People don't do it. So what's the alternative to that? Is there more garbages needed? Is there more maintenance personnel needed to come in after to ensure? That's up to the employer and the company, but it gets bad enough, they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, understood. It's addressing those causes of rodents in the first place. People don't want to have rodents in their building, but do they care enough to manage their own behavior is the question.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. I have a story to share. It's a little bit outside the box of homes and buildings. Last month, I couldn't start my car, and I thought, oh, that's weird. And I had my car looked at, and a rodent actually had climbed underneath the car and chewed out a wire and made off with it. And it was connecting the battery to the computer in the car, and expensive repair. My question is, it was suggested to me, oh, you could just sprinkle a few drops of essential oil in there, like peppermint, that rodents don't like, and that actually can repel them and keep them away. Does that actually work? Are there
I
effective
love I
deterrents?
love this question. I love it. So
Okay.
the internet myths is what we call them. You know, from the peppermint oils to the bounce sheets to the Irish Spring soap, and my favorite is the ultrasonics. None of them work. If they want to go there, they're going to go there. Now, I can tell you right now, we get this call weekly about wiring harnesses getting chewed out. And what is car manufacturing have done is the plastics were really expensive, so they went to a soy-based wiring harnesses to get away from these plastics. It was cheaper. Well, now you've got soy-based wiring harnesses as an attractant, and we've got squirrels, rats, mice, chipmunks, red squirrels, and they're causing thousands of dollars in damage. And I mean, I've had 2 people put their houses up for sale because it happened to them 4 times. They don't have a garage, they can't do anything, so they're moving out of the area. You're not the only one that's had this happen to them.
That's horrible. I mean, who thought it was a good idea to start making cars out of food anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's only so much you can do. I don't know about putting exclusion netting underneath my vehicle, but I'd have to
Yeah.
have a look at it. Um, so something I thought I wanted to touch on with you is we're working on a collaboration right now to try and put more natural pest control solutions out there in the form of owl boxes. I can share my screen and show you guys. So partnering with Ontario Wildlife Removal, we're fabricating a whole bunch of these boxes that will be made available for purchase in London, I believe starting in December. Can you talk a little bit more about this as a solution for rodent pest issues?
Yeah, so it started off as a simple. My son wanted have an owl box, and one of my guys made one. We put it up, and we got one, and we put a live camera on it, which created some buzz. And then fast forward, a bunch of people started wanting. We made them, and we started building more. And we kind of thought, well, you know, there is a positive impact to this. I'm bringing these natural birds of prey to our house, and not only for visual pleasure, but also a functionality behind it. These natural spots to put, even in the urban environment, in residential urban houses, we put them up, and people are taking pictures of owls in their box. So it's not just if you live in the country, or hey, I don't have trees in my property. We've mounted them on houses. And the benefits of this is, yes, are these owls going to solve your mouse problem? Probably not. Okay. But these owls can start eliminating some of them in the area and create a habitat in the urban environment to mate, also to reproduce, and have more and more of, like, we'll say, areas that these guys can nest in to promote and grow more for the future of hunting these rodents in your area. So do I see a direct benefit? Yes. Do I physically see them hunting? No, because they're at night. But what I have seen is them bringing their food back into the nest through my camera, and it's unreal to see. You know, I'm talking 3 or 4 mice in an hour come back to the nest. So they're excellent hunters, and these are just little screech owls. Because you can imagine, you know, you get into some of the bigger owls. You know, what are they catching? So I love the idea of owl conservation and birds of prey conservation. I'm a big wildlife guy, so are all my guys, and I have to give credit to my guys Kevin and Alex. They're the one that started making these boxes, and we just ran from there. And so the credit is due to my 2 guys that work for me. They're awesome, and they started this project.
Yeah, it sounds like a great team. And I know folks in London are quite excited about this as well. Our plan is to have these be available for purchase in the beginning of December. And the proceeds from the sale of these boxes will actually be donated to Salthaven to support the work that Brian and his team are doing, conserving wildlife and birds of prey. I've had one of these in my backyard for a while, and I'm excited. Maybe this winter will be the first we have owls using it. But I've seen from where I know owls live in my neighborhood, they'll regurgitate pellets, and they're very active. Like, if you know where there's an owl living in a tree, you can imagine the volume of rodents that each one consumes. So yeah, more information about that program will be on our website, birdfriendlylondon.ca. If you're looking to get your hands on an owl box, we'll probably have an event coming up to distribute those. So I'm just looking at the time, and I see we've got a few questions in the chat, but part of the purpose of this session was to make Jared and myself and Alex and Brian available to our program participants. I mentioned that this year we're hosting the Responsible Pest Management Pilot Program. This is the first of its kind, really aiming to provide resources to homeowners and businesses to help them pest-proof their buildings without relying on rodenticides. And the purpose here is to translate some of the knowledge we've already heard into community so that these solutions can be applied. I'm going to go through some questions in the chat in the order that they're there. If you have a question, feel free to add it to the Q&A. So Nicole asks, which cities ban rodenticides? I think I may have mentioned that there aren't a ton of cities that have done this. I think it was, did I say Peterborough? Pickering is the first city in Ontario to have introduced a ban through a bylaw earlier this year. And I think Clarington is now looking at it as well. This isn't something that has seen a lot of uptake in Ontario, but we know that the province of British Columbia has introduced legislation that phases out rodenticides. So I see a second question from Nicole. How do I get churches to stop using glue traps? Oh, we haven't talked about glue traps. Those are pretty sinister as well. I see Brian and Jared nodding. Yeah, that's a real concern. And I've seen an increase in glue traps since we've had invasive insect issues, such as the spongy moths. I think it's usually a good idea to try and have a conversation with the decision makers who put those there in the first place. So that might be someone working in building maintenance who can refer you to their boss, but letting them know about the harms that are caused. Writing a one-page letter with information, they might be receptive. It might be that they just don't know. And especially if you can provide alternative suggestions of here's why this is harmful, but also here's other ways that you can manage your pests more effectively. I'm sure they would appreciate that. I'm not sure of the circumstances of where these are being used, but for insects, burlap can be really effective around trees. For rodents, you know, there's live traps. And again, as Jared talked about, you should probably be dealing with how rodents are entering in the first place, or they're just going to keep coming back. I see a question from Nicole. Does the owl poo repel rodents? Interesting. You know, I've never actually thought about that. What do you think? I don't know if you or Jared or Brian have an answer for that, but do you think rodents can smell when there's a bird of prey nearby?
I'm going to say no, because rodents don't care. I mean, they go into houses with dogs, cats, humans. They don't care. That's my opinion. I don't have, I guess, say professional knowledge on that, but I can say by everything else, there's cat's urine, dog urine, and stuff like that in yards all over the place, and mice still invade. So I'm going to say that's probably no.
Yeah.
I know of some studies that have been done with cat urine as it affects lab mice, and the cat urine actually repels the mice, but with a parasite that is associated with cats, it actually attracts the mice. So it is shed in fecal matter as well as in urine in some cases. And this parasite has the ability to change the brains of the rodents, so they're actually attracted to it and become more vulnerable to the predator. But that's the only case I know of that might satisfy that question.
Wow, that's wild. I've never heard of that. I'll have to look it up. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of wildlife, including rodents, will just habituate. They'll get used to a scent that's there. And if they're managing to get by day in, day out, like they're not going to be too worried. Maybe a little bit extra vigilant, but I think about some of the strategies people use for getting rid of birds, and the birds just get used to whatever you put out there. Like they know they're not really in danger. I see a question from Kathy. How do you keep squirrels out of the owl box? We had a resident owl for one summer, and then the squirrels moved in. Interesting. I don't know if Jared, you've had any experience with that with yours.
Yes, it is a problem. And what we try to do is if you can catch them before they give birth, we actually go up and remove, like we put our own wood shavings in it, but when they start bringing sticks in and starting to build a nest, we'll go in there and take them out. And we'll just monitor it for a little while. You do that for a few days, it usually gets them out of there. But I've caught it late once and the babies were born, so they got to live in there until the babies were grown up. So that's how I've managed it. There's no other way to actually prevent them from going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
owls, especially, they nest at certain times of the year, and if you could put these owl boxes up just before they nest, they usually occupy the boxes before the squirrels get there. But you're right, Jared. It's a real tussle between the two species. But timing, I think, of putting the box up is really important.
Yeah, that's good advice. And it's kind of entertaining, I imagine. I mean, you're in suspense, like who's gonna get the box this year? They're
And
pretty
sometimes it's a
frightening.
fight.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've had it on camera where the squirrel was in there and the owl came in and a tussle happened and there goes the squirrel. So, if the owl wants it, he's going to get it.
Another question from Kathy. We have noticed a great increase in rat population in our yard. Saw only one last year, now there are several. My neighbor had one in their house. How can we manage the explosion of rats and keep them out of the house? Well, Kathy, I think a lot depends on the specific site. We've heard from Jared that there are a number of techniques you can use to inspect the outside of your building and look for where rats might be getting in. But I don't know, Jared, do you have any specific advice based on her question? Like if there's an explosion of rats going on, what do they do?
Yeah, it's funny because I used to field maybe one rat call a month, maybe in my town here, and since COVID, and it's exploded everywhere, and we believe it's because the restaurant shut down, and what happened is that was their food source in the garbage bins and stuff like that. So the rats kind of filtered out in other urban environments, and then started breeding when they had more areas, and it's exploded. Now we're doing 3 to 5 rat calls a week in our hometown. So what you can do is, again, there's nothing you can control to bring if the rats are in the area and they come on your property. The best thing you can do is let's protect the house and make sure they can't get in. And that's about the only thing you can do unless you're going to start putting traps outside. But then there's non-target animals that you're going to get. You're going to get red squirrels. You're going to get chipmunks. You might even get other cats and stuff like that in the area. So the good thing is we need to learn to live with wildlife in the urban environment. And the best thing you can do is if you fix and protect your house, and we don't have to worry about what animals are out there, they're not getting in anyway.
Yeah, Jared's absolutely right. The rats and mice are, I mean, it's food and shelter. That's what it's all about. And if you take the food away, oftentimes you'll take the problem away as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good comment about the attractants of rodents. There's parts of London that are prone to a lot of litter, and if garbage is not being stored appropriately outside, that might be why the rodents are there in the first place, is they have a really good food source. I've heard it suggested that if you can take your garbage out to the curb until like the morning of pickup, that can sometimes reduce the likelihood of wildlife getting in. But yeah, if you have specific concerns about your yard, Kathy, it would be worthwhile to maybe have a professional come in and take a look, and they can give you more specific advice. A question from Candace. What has been put in place at municipal buildings in London to stop rodent problems? I can try and take that question. So from what I can tell in London, there has not been a ton of effort by the municipal government or affiliated parties to really address rodenticide use in the city. If there have been specific attempts to deal with a rodent issue at particular buildings, I'm not aware of that. I don't have that information. I will say from walking around, there's a number of bait stations that can be found outdoors around municipal buildings. So it suggests that this is an ongoing practice. It's something I think we should be asking questions about and looking at critically, because as we've heard, it's not necessarily going to be effective for reducing pest issues, and it might have secondary harm. I see another question from Kathy. I'm not sure if this is the same Kathy as before. We have chipmunks living in our walls of our 1887 double brick house. We've sealed as best we can, repointed the brick, and sealed up any areas of entry we can find. What else can we do? So you're wondering how to get rid of the chipmunks, and you're not sure where they're getting in. What do you think, Jared? Any suggestions? Oh, I think you're muted.
I would highly recommend calling a professional. We get this all the time. We see things instantly that homeowners don't see, and we know where these animals typically go, and we can go really find that. The best thing I can tell you is get down on your hands and knees. And most people just walk around, don't get in behind the bushes and see, don't look up under basement windows. If you have additions, they usually look under the addition it's attached to the house. But my biggest recommendation is if you're having problems with an animal, always call a professional in, even just for inspection. They can tell you where it's going in, and then you can handle it yourself anyway.
Yep, good advice. I see a question from anonymous attendee. I just saw the picture where Brendan and Jared is holding the bird nest and the glass on the door is attached with bird-friendly stickers. Just want to say that's so cool. Is there any way that we can get those stickers? And where is the best place for applying the stickers? Yeah, I'm happy you asked about that. Good catch. For those who missed it, this is what they're talking about. This is a window at Westminster Pond Centre in London, and we've treated these with a product called feather-friendly DIY tape. The purpose of this is to help birds recognize that there's a solid piece of glass here and they can't fly through. Oftentimes birds will make a mistake and they think, oh, that's a real tree or that's an extension of open space. I will paste a link into the chat. This is on our website, birdfriendlylondon.ca. We've compiled a list of where you can purchase that specific product in London. Importantly, it doesn't have to be that product. You can get a marker, you can put tape up on the window. It's just important that you cover the entire window and don't leave gaps too much wider than a bird. Thank you for asking.
I can maybe add to that too, Brendan. At Salthaven, when we first moved into our new facility here, we have a lot of windows, and we were averaging a bird strike every week. And so we invested in the bird-friendly stickers, and we put it up on all of our windows. And we've only had 2 bird strikes in the last 3 years since then. So it is effective.
It really is. We've actually been distributing these through the London Food Bank recently, and we've got some kits to send your way, Brian. These were sponsored by the municipal government here in London, and we've been giving away kits to homeowners, especially low-income households. Feel free to reach out to us at our email if you'd like to request a kit. We do have some extras. I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I can probably take one more question before wrapping up here. I'll try and pick a question from somebody who's not yet had a chance to ask one. It says, Feng Ming, what kind of camera did you put inside the owl box, Jared? May involve a power supply and communication distance limit. Good question. What are you using for your box at home?
Well, actually, a lot of people get the Arlo cameras. I'm lazy, so I didn't want to go up and have to replace the battery all the time. So I have a home security system with cameras. So when they installed it, I got an extra one. It's hardwired, and it's actually on the branch, sticking and facing my owl box. So I don't have one actually in the owl box. At first I thought it was intrusive, and I didn't know if I wanted to do that. I wanted to see the outside activity of them landing and coming and stuff like that. But that's what I've done. I did a hardwire security camera system, and it's on our Instagram, Ontario Wildlife Removal. You actually can go look and view. You got to scroll down a bit, but you'll see lots of video of our owl, our screech owl, and the visual representation that the camera gives.
That's excellent. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a correction that was shared in the chat by Janice. She just wanted to clarify about Pickering, because I had mentioned municipal bylaws as a way of phasing out rodenticides. Jenna says that Pickering's ban will hopefully come into effect in December. It's a resolution, not a bylaw, and so far it only applies to municipal properties. Also, first-generation rodenticides are sadly still used in BC. We continue to work with other municipalities within Durham. So it sounds like there is progress being made, but we're not yet seeing some of those regulatory pieces really taking effect to deal with this. I think it's a strong case to be made for more public education and awareness, which is, of course, why we're all here today. So with that, I recognize there were a few questions in the chat we couldn't get to. I'll put my email in the chat as well if you guys want to reach out afterwards for any questions. I will hand it back over to Alex to wrap things up for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. I just want to say a big thanks to Brendan and Jared and Brian for taking the time out of their day to speak with us today. And a big thank you to everyone who attended. I hope that you learned something valuable tonight. And as I mentioned earlier, all of our social medias are available in the chat. And so if you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to any of us and we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you again for attending, and I hope that you have a great night. Thank you.